was a musical composition by Alex Arango called En la Plaza, and is of the musical genre called Pasillo in Spanish. In 1820, the Spanish viceroyalty of Granada fell under the great liberator, General Simón Bolívar, who fought for its independence from Spain. So Nueva Granada became known as La Gran Colombia, which later broke into the modern countries of Colombia, Panama, Venezuela, and Ecuador. Pasillo music originated in Colombia and is extremely popular in those countries, has spread to other areas, as considered the national musical style of Ecuador. As Pasillo music has evolved, it has altered the classically European waltz dance form by lending itself to accompaniment by guitar, mandolin, string, and other instruments. Please recall the composer, Alex Arango, is one of the recipients of the Lee Weimer's Emerging Artists Award last month. He's from Colombia. He's an audio engineer, an educator, and a musician who played all the instruments you heard in this piece. So I thought that beyond the cash award we gave him, sharing his music with you would be a nice show of our support for his art. So, speakers today, welcome. Remember to stay within your assigned time limit so you don't negatively impact others who are scheduled to follow you. Welcome, everyone. It's our 5,274th meeting. Since no one was born on November 4th, we are bringing you a short portion of a clip of children wearing their Halloween costumes. Kathy Wiley, the chair, and members of Rotary Club's Los Amigos de Washington committee, grammar school committee, were the catalyst for this event, which helped bring a sense of normalcy to the children. So thanks very much, Rotarians, for staying involved despite this pandemic. Well, I screwed up and I didn't account for this longer clip here, so we're behind the 8-ball here. Sal, are you with us? Sal Pizarro, Man About Town, and what's going on?
So here's what's going on.
What's going on? Hey, what's going on? Wanna know what's going on?
Okay, so this is the first November in that I can remember where Plaza de Cesar Chavez is not filled with activity as they're setting up for Christmas in the Park. Because for this year, because of the pandemic, Christmas in the Park has moved to History San Jose. And of course, we all know where that is because it's the home of the Gordon House. But it's still going to go on. It's going to be a drive-through event starting November 27th, which is the Friday after Thanksgiving, and running all the way through January 3rd. Now, everything is going to be lit up. You're going to have all the regular displays, all the community trees, and a lot of History San Jose's buildings are going to be lit up. So it's only taking place during the evening from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Tickets are $10 to $20 per car. It's $10 if you go between 4 and 5, $20 afterwards. So that should be exciting. Jason Minsky has been working really hard on it. It's going to be a different experience, but I think it's going to be just as wonderful as the regular walkthrough, and hopefully we'll all be back at Plaza de Cesar Chavez next year. So another one of our great nonprofits, Loaves and Fishes, is celebrating its 40th anniversary, and that's happening November 14th at 4 o'clock. Now this is going to be emceed by the San Jose Sharks announcer, Randy Hahn, and Jim Stump, who owns The Table in Willow Glen, as well as several restaurants, Campbell. He's going to be doing a cooking demo. Tickets are $40 because it's the 40th anniversary, and you can see the website there, loavesfishes.com. maestroweb.com, where you can register to take part. That should be a fun event, and Loaves and Fishes does so much to feed the hungry in our community. They just opened up a new building on Burger Drive with the help of John Sobrato, so they are doing very well. Next up, okay, our veterans unfortunately are not going to be able to ride in the Veterans Day Parade this year, but San Jose, which has had a Veterans Day celebration since 1919, will continue to have a celebration. It will only be virtual, though. The theme is Honor Their Sacrifice. And Mike Hennessy, who you may know from the Car Guy channel, put together a 90-minute video featuring military members, elected officials, other guests. He asked me to say what Veterans Day meant to me. That will be broadcast on the outlet, which is Comcast Channel 30, at noon and 4 p.m. on Veterans Day, which is next Wednesday. Since we'll be meeting, we can catch the 4 p.m., or you can watch it on createtvsj.org, watch Channel 30.
Okay.
Another thing that's coming up, Turkey Trot is also virtual, but you can handle that between November 21st and 29th. You can design your own course, and there is the registration, svturkeytrot.com, so you don't have to get up early on Thanksgiving morning, Fernando.
Okay, thank you very much. We have to move it along. That's great news for you.
That's perfect.
We've got Brian Franklin coming in, financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. He was with the local impact committee, but they changed it to homeless impact committee. Brian, you got something for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everybody. So wanted to give you an update on the homeless impact committee that both Morris Chubb and myself co-chair, and just share a little bit of the history and things we've got going on here in our community. So the Homeless Impact Committee is actually, we've literally just relabeled this committee. It started a number of years ago when President Cindy Faulkner at the time wanted to make an impact locally. And so the Impact Committee was created. And as of a couple of years ago, or a few years ago, I guess, whenever President Gary Scheer had his tenure and his focus on homeless, we grabbed that concept as a committee and started focusing on homeless issues locally here. And so in this past month, with this focus, we had decided let's rebrand ourselves. And as of 30 days ago, we are now the Homeless Impact Committee. Trying to be impactful. We kept that in the name, as well as being, we'll say, overt about what we're doing. So with that said, is in the past few months here, we've jumped on board with several activities. One is we started to focus, we found a group, an encampment of homeless individuals around the Columbus Park area, which is right off of Julian by 87 area, and started coordinating with them in regards to bringing them water, food, loaves and fishes, work with them to bring them food on an ongoing basis. Got some supplies, tents, sleeping bags, other necessities that they needed for their day-to-day living. With that said, we are now focusing on the downtown area and are actively searching for a new encampment where we can really get involved with to, we'll say, increase this support that we're doing for these folks. And we're looking right around Waz Way, Guadalupe River, right in that area near the Children's Discovery Museum. What we've also done is we have a small budget with our committee, and we had worked with Bridge Housing, which is a temporary housing, a transitional housing for homeless. And we actually put hygiene kits together. So think of all
15 seconds, Brian.
With all the supplies that we use, toothbrushes, toothpaste, soap, we brought that to them, and we're working on a second camp to start doing. So hopefully that kept within my time, President Fernando.
Excellent, perfectly. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to introduce to you our county supervisor for District 1, much of it which is in South County, Supervisor Mike Wasserman. Mike, you have 10 minutes. Tell us about yourself and your district.
Thank you, Fernando. And they say South County. I I represent Gilroy, San Martin, Morgan Hill, Los Gatos, Montessorino, and 250,000 people in San Jose. Some 60% of my district is San Jose, but because my predecessor, Don Gage, was from South County, Gilroy, they always think about it being South County District. I'm going to speed through this in my 10 minutes, Fernando. First of all, I've got the annual ag report to share with your members. I want to let you all know that nursery crops has overtaken mushrooms. We came in with $81 million in nursery crops versus mushrooms $79 million. Lettuce still brings up third place, and pepper is hitting cleanup in fourth position. So I thought your members might like to learn a little something new there that wasn't election related. Number two is the census. Every 10 years, the county conducts the census for multiple purposes. One is to make sure that each district, each supervisorial district, is within 10% population of the highest and the lowest. That way it makes sure that each of us represents the same number of people, as we do right now, approximately 400,000 people. The most important part of the census, though, is what federal and state funding, especially federal funding, the county receives, depends on how many people we have, men, women, ages, demographics, everything, races, etc. And it's that thorough census, the bigger the number, the more money Santa Clara County receives from the governments. And 7/8, $7 billion of our $8 billion budget comes from the federal and state government with strings attached on how it must be spent. So if we don't count all the people, we still have to provide services for all the people. So the more people we count, the more funds we have to do that. And I'm happy to say with this graphic here, the national average of self-reporting during the census was 67%. It was 70% in the state of California, and Santa Clara County led all counties with a 77.7% self-reporting, which is our highest number percentage ever. Here's the individual cities. Unfortunately, San Jose came in last as far as number of people that self-reported. But again, San Jose has half the population, so that's a lot of work. That's two items. I get down to the budget deficit. This year, because of COVID, we've been notified by the federal and state governments that we are not going to be receiving the funding we usually receive, because they are not going to be receiving the same amount of sales tax and income taxes. Unemployed people earn less money, they pay less tax. Unemployed people or partially employed people earn less money, pay less tax, and buy fewer things, which results in sales tax. I used to fill up my car every 5 days. I now fill it up once a month. That's where the gas tax comes from, for roads and airports and things like that. So bottom line, federal and state governments, which are 7/8 of the county budget, are receiving less money, so we're going to be receiving less money. We are now meeting every 60 days to adjust our budget. We had a 15% cut in the district attorney's and sheriff's office. In another week or so, we're going to be announcing the other cuts in all the other departments in Santa Clara County. That is the budget. The census I already did. Oh, now I'm going to get to COVID. And I believe I have 5.5 minutes left.
Yep.
All right. So, Fernando, on COVID, we are what is now called the orange tier. The state government has changed their metrics and their categories 3 times since this began 7 months ago. But there's tier 1, 2, 3, 4. There's tier purple, red, orange, and yellow. We started off in the purple. Then we met some of the state's metrics. They allowed us to move into the red. When they allowed us to move into the red, we met some more of their metrics. They allowed us to move into the orange. Our public health officer, Dr. Cody, allowed almost everything the state allows, except for the inside participation, where the state allowed 50%, say inside worshiping and inside dining. She was only comfortable at 25%. A couple of facts your members, some may know, some may not know. Excuse me. The state public health officer makes the public health order, which is law for all 58 counties. then each of the 58 public health officers can independently decide to follow the state's orders or make them stricter. She cannot make them more lenient. So the state came out with 3 metrics which they evaluate each county on. And depending on where each county fits in those metrics, determines what color tier that county can be in. So let's say, for instance, a county is in the red in 2 of the 3 metrics, but in the purple in the other one, they must be in purple. Whatever your worst color is what your county must be in. So if you were in 2 yellows and a red, you would be in red. So I'm going to show you members now the 3 metrics. This first one has 2 lines. The dotted line is where we would be without a special credit, and you will see that we are in the red. Does that show up pretty well?
As best as we can do it, yeah.
Okay, there's the dotted line, and we're solidly in the red with the dotted line. However, we have been testing far more people than what the state required. And that particular metric is about how many positives you have each day based on per 100,000 people population. What happened was we were testing so many people and coming up with so many positives because the more you test, the more positives you get. Obviously, if you tested nobody, you'd have no positives. If you tested all 2 million people every day, you'd have a whole lot of positives. So we went to the state and we said, wait a minute, we're testing almost twice as many people as you're requiring us to. Do you want us to test fewer people? And they said, no, we'll give you a credit. So because of our excessive testing, they moved us down from there down to here. They moved us from red to yellow only because of our excessive testing. If our testing goes down, we're going to move into the red, and the state will back us up from orange to red. In the second metrics, we are firmly in the yellow. And in the third and final metrics, we are in the orange. So we did have 1 in the red, 1 in the orange, 1 in the yellow. We would have been in the red, being the worst metric, except for our testing credit. And our testing credit almost disappeared when we had all that smoke in the air and people didn't want to go outside. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. They didn't want to go outside in the smoky air to stand in line and be tested, so our numbers went down. Now the weather's great and the people are out there. We're testing about 8,000 people a day. Please get tested as often as you like. It's the short swab now. Your insurance, there's no cost to you. Your insurance will cover it or the county will cover it. It's painless. The results take 2 to 3 days, and the more people we test, the better. I recommend people get tested every 2 weeks. The last part in my last minute, Fernando, is the new thing we announced Tuesday at the board meeting yesterday, which is our vaccine program. A vaccine is coming. We are going to be fully prepared for when a vaccine becomes available to Santa Clara County. We're not going to start to get ready then. We will be ready. People getting their flu shots now, we're saying, hey, get your flu vaccine. Please, everyone, get your flu vaccine. Wear your mask and get tested. And when a vaccine does come to Santa Clara County, and it's going to go to public health and public safety first, and the aged and the compromised in the long-term nursing. But when it does come, Santa Clara County will be fully set up at many, many, many sites, dozens of sites, to distribute it efficiently. And that's my 10 minutes. Fernando.
Well, you really packed in a lot of information there, Mike.
Yes,
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we learned a lot, and that was the objective behind inviting all of you and your colleagues to come to talk to us every other month.
Thank you. Be safe, everyone.
Yeah, I'll be bringing over a book that we published about the history of our Rotary Club, and I'll drop it off to your office tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Our last meeting for Fine Opportunities in November is November 18th. So please contact Gay Crawford to share your good news with us. I know you've got some good news, So call her up. All right, Steve Ellenberg, come on in. You're litigation attorney with Hopkins and Carley, immediate past chair of the program committee. You'll be introducing our speaker.
I am here. Hello, everybody. I'm not working off a lot of sleep, probably like some of you, but I'm confident I got more sleep than our speaker. When we originally booked this, which was I think like last November, this was supposed to be, as you see, an election recap. I think we're going to get an election forecast today. And we all know Larry Gerston. I want to just say two things. Larry is completing his 40th year at NBC Bay Area, and I think he's talked to our Rotary Club probably at more times than Alec Baldwin has hosted Saturday Night Live. And I can say this, I think Larry is a San Jose treasure, and we are just delighted to have him sort this out for us. So thank you again, Larry, for coming.
Thanks, Steve. It's great to be with you virtually, not nearly as good as when we're together. I don't know how many times I've had the pleasure, and I say pleasure, of speaking before Rotary, because you guys are the best. I want to tell you something. I am not a fan of talking through Zoom. I have to teach a course through that. I have to do NBC through that. I actually discharged all of my talks this year, canceled them all via Zoom, except for this one, because this organization is just fabulous, and it wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be normal. So here I am, and I've got all the information up to date regarding the various ballot issues and races locally, and I'm happy to talk to you about those. I would tell you that they're incomplete, and that some of the close ones no doubt will change. So we can go to that if you want afterwards. But I think, look, the fundamental issue right now is the presidency and that election. And I think it's worth our while to spend some time on it. It is a work in progress. As Steve said, it's not an election recap. I don't know what it is. But anyway, let's talk about what we know, what may happen, and we can go from there. What we know is that it's an incredibly close election. What we know is that when all the votes are counted in terms of the popular vote, I'm predicting that Joe Biden will exceed Donald Trump by about 5 million votes. Hillary Clinton did this by about 3 million votes last time around. I think it's going to be a good 5 million by the time we're done. And by the way, go back to Hillary Clinton's election, 2016, the Gore-Bush election in 2000, and we're seeing a fairly frequent issue here in terms of the popular vote exceeding the electoral vote. I think that's something worth discussing, not just today, but for all of us a lot, and how we're going to cope with that and what we need to do about it. But that's no doubt for another time. But I do want to let you know that once again, we are seeing a situation where if Trump wins, we'll have that diversion that we've seen now 3 times in recent elections. It looks like now, and of course what we see now is a lot different than what we saw about 1 o'clock this morning, which goes to show you that you never know what you're going to wake up to. It looks like Biden right now is in the driver's seat as much as anyone can be in the driver's seat. There's certainly no safety belt here, that's for sure. He, as things look right now, has 2 paths to victory, and I say that based on Michigan and Wisconsin now in Biden's camp. Those seem to be pretty secure, and I also say that with the states like Georgia and North Carolina being in Trump's camp. We'll get to that in a second. So Biden has 2 paths. One is to win Pennsylvania. Last I saw, just a few minutes ago, he's down 398,000 votes. There are somewhere between 1 million and 1.25 million left to be counted. The overwhelming number of those votes will be Democratic. They were mailed in. We know the Democrats had a huge mail-in campaign. And the data shows so far that it's about 70% of the mailed-in votes have been Democratic. We also know that these votes are coming from very Democratic areas. The Biden campaign is bullish. They really believe they're going to get it and eke out a win. I don't know, but that's what they're saying. So that's one path, get Pennsylvania. The other path that I think is, in some ways, more interesting is that Biden wins, along with all the other states that he's won, Arizona and Nevada. Arizona right now, with about 86% of the vote in, Biden has about an 87,000 vote lead. Most of the votes left are in Maricopa County, which, as you probably know, is pretty Democratic, about 60% Democratic. So there's a pretty good chance that Biden will get that state. The other state, which I think is a bit of a surprise, is Nevada, only because the vote is so close there. Nevada, right now, Biden is leading by about 7,800 votes. There are about 15% of the vote left, I think, to be counted there. Most of them are going to be in Clark County. Clark County is very Democratic, a strong labor city. So it's reasonable to believe, and believe is the operative word right now, that Biden will get Nevada. Nevada's got 6 electoral votes. Arizona's got 11. That gives Biden, I think I figured it out, 270, exactly 270. You need 270 to win. He gets it. Pennsylvania gives him a bit more. The president has a much more circuitous route, and really only one basic route, and that's assuming he wins North Carolina, which I think is fair, and Georgia, which is still outstanding. Georgia's right now got about 80,000 votes that the president leads, but about 240,000 outstanding. Most of those are from urban areas, likely to go for Biden. Maybe Biden gets, Georgia, but let's give that to the president right now, to Trump. Assuming he wins Georgia, assuming he wins North Carolina, his only path right now, assuming that Nevada and we don't know about Nevada and Arizona. He's got to win Nevada and Arizona. He has to win Nevada and Arizona. He's got, and Pennsylvania is a must. He's got to have Pennsylvania. So the president has a taller mountain to climb, and there's no way. In the case of Biden, he doesn't need Pennsylvania if he gets Arizona and Nevada. The president's got to have them all. He has to run the table of the states left. And it looked last night like he would. It really looked like he would last night. It was done deal. But they were talking about all those mail-in votes. And by golly, they're popping up. And I think it's really important to say this is not magic. This is not votes that fell off a truck. These are not votes that people are writing in during their lunch break. These are votes that were there, period. And it's just a matter of going through the process to count huge numbers of votes. So, if you're a betting person and you're not betting the house, Biden is in the driver's seat right now. But, I wish I could be more definitive with you about this, but I can't. Now, why is it so close? There are a couple of things to talk about here. It's clear to me, and frankly, I'm a bit mystified, but I got to tell you, the data are the data. Voters were more concerned with their pocketbooks than the COVID virus. They were not as willing to embrace Biden's idea about, the way we get to a better economy is by beating the virus. They were more willing to vote to buy the president's argument, which is, we're okay. We're dealing with it. We're rounding the corner. and let's get back with the economy. The president's always done best with the economy. Now, I know a lot of people are going to argue about this. Well, it's not right. It's not fair. It's Obama. I'm not here for all that. The point is the president scores well with the economy, whether you like it or don't. I got to tell you the data. That's the data. And so I said I'm mystified because to me, this is my bias, I got to believe that with 240,000 people dead and 9 million plus, people would be more concerned. But all you have to do is get to the second point I'm going to make, the rallies. The president was drawing huge crowds the last couple of weeks, huge crowds. And these crowds that you saw, there were people packed in like sardines, no masks. And many of them, no doubt, will be sick and sometimes die from this thing, but it didn't matter to them, which was really something about the connection that the president has with his supporters. There is no one that has a connection like he does with his supporters. And the problem with that is that for the 3 to 5% who were undecided and who had to think about, do I go with Trump or do I go with Biden? I think in the end, most of them went with Trump enough to tilt this thing and make it close. Why didn't they go with Biden? Well, I'm going to give you my feeling about this. And I think it's because Biden played it right. And by that, I say played it right. You saw his rallies, so to speak, the parking car lots, where he met with people, socially distant, masked, all that stuff. He didn't hold these great big meetings. He did what I would call was socially responsible. Well, in the process of doing that, I'm not so sure that Biden got the word out to the minions like Trump did. And I think, by in a sense, doing the right thing, I think he unwittingly has made this closer than it might have been. And I'm not saying he should have done what Trump did, but I'm only telling you that I think that's part of the problem. There's another reason why this thing is closer. And that's because incumbents win the presidency 75% of the time. Why do they win the presidency so much? Because as incumbents, they have the power to do so much. They could call a press conference just like that, and people come, the press comes. They have the biggest megaphone in the world in the White House. They can use their resources to move money around, as the president did in setting up that $300 a week, giving billions of dollars to farmers, doing all kinds of things that come from the ability as president to get those things done. And that's why incumbents do so much better, especially when you're talking about the presidency. You've got to factor that in as one of the reasons this became a close race. So I think those are all there. And now I'm going to give you another factor that I think is going to become increasingly important as the data emerges, and that's the U.S. Postal Service. DeJoy, the postal director, Postmaster General, that's what he's called, Postmaster General, promised there'd be no difference. I'm going to deliver no matter what my changes. Well, what you may or may not know is 13% of their automatic massive sorting machines were taken away. Almost 700. They sort 25,000 letters an hour. And the post office is now admitting that they did not come through and that they didn't deliver. We don't know how many thousands or hundreds of thousands of ballots, I suspect it's the hundreds of thousands, to key demographic points, key points in Atlanta, Georgia, for example, in Pennsylvania. And I think there's going to be a lot of suspicion around this. There's going to be a lot of research into this. And I don't know how it's going to all unfold at the end of the day. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a court fight out of this, simply being that these people were denied, these people who sent their letters a week or so earlier, their ballots, were denied the right to vote because of this kind of a screw up. I don't know how that'll work. I don't know what the courts will say, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a court suit, especially if this does not unfold for the Democrats the way they believe it will. That's an unknown. Okay, so what about the remaining ballots? Well, I think I talked to you about Pennsylvania already. It's about 398,000 left, about 1.25 million. It looks like Pennsylvania, most of them are going to go toward toward Biden. He needs 2/3. Biden has been running with the mail-in ballots at 70%. That shows you just how squeaky this whole thing is, how close it is, okay? It's expected that those votes will be overwhelmingly for Biden, but we just don't know. You don't know till you see it. What else might I add to all this? The U.S. Supreme Court, you could expect challenges there in the court. This, I think, is another reason for people to lose sleep if you don't have enough already, simply because the Pennsylvania issue particularly was brought to the Supreme Court already as to whether they could go ahead and lengthen the due date for the ballots 3 more days. The court deadlocked on this 4-4. That was before Justice Barrett was added to the Supreme Court. The conservatives, of course, said no more 3 days. The liberals and moderate Chief Justice Roberts said yes, 4-4, therefore, you guys know how this works, the lower ruling held. I think it's reasonable to say that if Justice Barrett participates in that issue, should the court accept it, she's likely to vote with the conservatives. That just makes sense. The question is, will she? Will she? Well, why wouldn't she? Well, how would you like to be a brand new justice on the Supreme Court and knowing that your vote could well mean the difference in the outcome of an election? That's your first case. What does that say about her reputation? What does it say about the legitimacy of the Supreme Court? As it is, so many other institutions are already in trouble on legitimacy. The court has been the one branch of the national government that for years has stood out as being fair, no matter what, liberals, conservatives, you name it. And I just think that would be an absolute, strike at the heart of the court's legitimacy. And I think Chief Justice Roberts will have a really long sit down with Justice Barrett on that. But I'm speculating like all of us, but I do think the issue is going to come before the courts. I think there'll be a lot of issues before the court, not only this one, but other ones. The court is, what they do, we don't know. We know what they've done in the past. All of this suggests that this issue is far from over. Pennsylvania thinks they'll have most of the votes counted by the end of today. Michigan is now buttoned down. That looks to be fairly safe for Biden. We're waiting on Arizona. We're waiting on Nevada. We're waiting on North Carolina. That's about it. So let me open it up and see what kind of questions you have. And maybe you've got some answers because I could use them.
So, Larry, we've got a ton of questions, which I get the pleasure of moderating. One that's come up quite a bit is what happened to the polls? Is it shy Trump voters? I mean, even pollsters that we thought of, Washington Post, ABC, as reputable pollsters, had Biden winning Wisconsin by 17% a week ago. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
What happened? And is the polling world gonna face a reckoning?
Let's deal with that. First of all, let's take the 70% out. That was an outlier. I mean, there are two sources I use, and they're both wonderful. Well, as far as polls go, they are. 538.com. It's all spelled out. 538.com. And Real Clear Politics. And the reason why these sources are good is because they show you all the polls, okay? And they often come up with what they call polls of polls. And so the polls of polls is what amalgamating all these things, taking the highs, taking the lows, putting them all together. Here's what we have. I went ahead for the last 2.5 weeks and tracked the Clinton-Trump polling in 2016 and the Biden-Trump polling in 2020. Every day I did this, okay? And by the last day that I looked at this, and that was Sunday, it was an 8-point spread nationally for Biden, okay? and Hillary Clinton at that point in time was only up 2 points. So she collapsed. And not only did she collapse, but she was never above 50%. Biden was still above 50%. Okay, that's nationally. That's nationally. And when you look at that 5 million vote spread that I predict, you'll see Biden winning probably by, I would say, 4%. Something like 52-48. And this is something you hear often, that is within the margin of error. Okay, it's within the margin. The real problem seems to be with state polls. That seems to be the problem because we had Wisconsin, we had by 6 or 7, Michigan by 6 or 7, Philadelphia by 7 or 8. Well, yeah, Wisconsin went Democratic by 50, 20,000 votes. That's nothing. Michigan by a few more. That's nothing. If Biden wins Pennsylvania, it'll be by a whisker, and the other ones are all pretty good. Most of the other ones were pretty good, pretty well done. Florida was always within a point or two, and that's how it ended just about. Okay, a little bit more. The Democrats dropped the ball on Miami-Dade. They just dropped the ball. North Carolina is close. In most of these cases, once you get out of the, quote, blue wall states, most of the polls were pretty good. All you need is a couple of bad ones, and there you have it. And I do think it augurs the question, are we relying too much on these polls? And I think the answer is yes. Once shame on you, twice shame on me. We've gone through this twice now. Polls are always going to be taken. But the people who run campaigns, I think, are going to start looking at polls as not as framing entities. Here's where I have to go. Here's what I have to do, as much as just sort of ancillary things. Long answer, sorry.
No worries. Can you talk a little bit about the Senate races? My understanding is it looks like the Republicans are likely to retain control of the Senate.
Yeah.
Who knows what will happen in Georgia? And so talk about that and how you think if Biden is elected, can he get anything done?
Okay. First of all, it looks like the Democrats are going to fall short. It looks like Peters in Michigan is going to win. And he's winning because of the votes have changed in Michigan. For Biden, people voted the straight party ticket. So Biden's good fortune becomes Peters' good fortune. But the Democrats lost, of course, in Alabama. The Democrats were counting on Susan Collins' seat, and she's going to get by. Maine started something called ranked choice voting, which you probably know about. And if she gets 50% plus 1, she's out of the woods. Last I heard, she was at 49.8. If she doesn't get 50%, then there's a runoff. And the third candidate, a real progressive Democrat, I guess you'd say, who, by the way, this is what happens when you have more than two candidates in a race, siphoned off those votes from the Democrat. And in the process, may well have assured Collins of that vote. Otherwise, Gardner lost his seat. We know that. Kelly won in Arizona. We know that. Assuming everything, it looks to me like it's going to be 51-49. Now, there's a Georgia runoff in January. I think it's January. Who knows what happens with that? Georgia's a pretty Republican state, although this year it's become far more competitive than ever before. So the second part of your question, how much can Biden do? Well, we'll find out. Biden says, assuming he gets elected, I'm going to bring the country together. We're going to work together, all the different parties. I know how to talk to the other side. We'll see. We'll see. I think it's going to be hard. They say that in a president's life as president, in his political life, the two best years are the first 2 years. Think about it. That's when Obama got the ACA done. The first 2 years are your best 2 years, and after that, everything falls apart. We'll see.
Yeah, I wonder what Mitch McConnell's going to do in the Senate when he doesn't have any Trump judges to approve. Seems like maybe this is just my editorializing, but Biden's going to have to work pretty hard with him to get him to pass anything.
He is, and it's going to be difficult. There's no question about it's going to be difficult. But I mean it's difficult these days anyway, no matter what. I mean, it would have been unless you've got both chambers and the presidency. It's really hard. It's really hard.
Going back to the election and the dynamics, Larry, can you talk about whether you thought the protests over the summer had any impact on the outcome?
I haven't seen any data on that, which is not to say it didn't. I think if it did have an impact, I think it went both ways. There might have been people who said, this is bad stuff. I'm going to vote for Trump, law and order. And there might have been other people who said, you know what? Finally, we're talking about social justice. I'm going to come out and vote. So I don't see it breaking in any one way. I think it might have broken in both ways. But I'm speculating. I haven't seen data on this. I haven't seen this. When we looked, what's the most important issue? The social justice question was around fifth. It wasn't up there. The economy, healthcare, they were 1, 2. And COVID was, I think, third or fourth, which again amazes me. It amazes me, and that's my reaction, that more people were not concerned about the management of this disease.
Along the same lines in terms of dissecting the election, social media have an impact. Evidently, Trump had a very effective digital campaign. Is that something that worked for them? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, always we have to look and see afterwards. They'll do some polling on this, and we'll find out. We do know that part of Trump's success, and there were many reasons Trump won in 2016. That was talk about an outlier election. That was the outlier election. We could talk about that forever. But one of the reasons was because they did a masterful social media campaign. I think everybody was more savvy about social media this time. People who read it, who listen to it, who participate in it, as well as the companies themselves, Twitter being very aggressive, Facebook being not as aggressive as some people would like. But clearly, I think social media was perhaps harnessed a bit more. I think Zuckerberg, who has said this loudly, is right. This industry needs to be regulated, and I think people in the industry themselves will feel better once it's regulated. It's coming, but I don't know that it had the impact in any major way, but it certainly did. It was definitely part of the mix in 2016.
So last questions on the election dissection. I'll combine them. Particularly with some of the Senate races, the amount of money that was raised, particularly by Democratic candidates who lost by double-digit amounts, was astonishing. And along with that, there was also, I think for the first time in my recollection, a number of opposite party media groups like the Lincoln Project and Republican Voters Against Trump. Can you tell us the impact of those groups, the impact of that money, or the non-impact of that money? What does that foretell for the future? And am I going to continue to just click $100 contributions every time I get an email from a guy who seems to be, a nice guy and looks like a good candidate?
Look, Steve, if you go back to 2016, Clinton outspent Trump 3-2. 3-2. Trump won. If you look at this election, the Democrats at the end had the funding advantage. They didn't early on, Early on, you couldn't find a Democrat to put in $10, and Trump had all the money in the world, because if you go back to January and February, this election was a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer. He was going to win. That's all there was to it. I mean, there are a couple of lessons to learn here, and one big important lesson is money doesn't always win. I've told people this forever until I'm blue in the face. There are so many elections where money just doesn't matter. I would remind you of the gubernatorial election in 2010, where Meg Whitman wrote checks of $150 million. Jerry Brown scrambled to get 25 million, excuse me. And my guess is he's probably still got 23 million of it as his account. Outspent, but not outmaneuvered, not outmanned. And I think once again, it gets to the point that money is not the only variable. One of the things about again, how COVID gets involved in this. The Trump campaign had a massive door-to-door, old style campaigning, door-to-door campaigning, face-to-face campaigning. The Biden people said, we're not going to do this. We're not going to put people's lives in jeopardy because of COVID. Again, you do the right thing, but you don't necessarily get the kind of result you want. What I'm trying to say is, it's not just money. It's how you run your campaign. It's how you spend your money. It's how well your campaign is organized. And I think it's the Biden team, if you will, was in some ways out-campaigned. Now, people who are concerned about the virus will say, well, yeah, but that was a terrible thing. Okay, it was a terrible thing. Meanwhile, he might win the presidency doing a terrible thing. Is it right? I'm not here to talk to you about right. I'm telling you what's effective, and that was effective. And I think that contributes. So money, keep spending your money, but let's hope that the people you spend it on have good campaigns to use it well.
So there's a number of other good questions about, election dissection, but a lot of people want to hear your perspective on state and local.
Okay.
So if you could talk a little bit about first the propositions, then I'll ask you about the local races. Seems like in my sense is where money really made a difference was Uber and Lyft on Prop 22.
Yeah.
Made a huge difference. Ultimately, I guess they're going to get their money's worth.
Well, let's start
about
with
that and some of the other ones.
Yeah, let's start with that. The rideshare companies and their allies wound up spending around $250 million on that one. The opponents spent around $15 million. That's 14, 15 to 1. This is a case when it wasn't just money. I'm giving you my assessment. I have no data to bear this out, but just thinking about it, if you think about what this idea is with carving out part of AB5 so that the rideshare companies would not have to pay minimum wage, would not have to provide benefits, in other words, their costs would not go up if it's passed. If their costs do go up, your costs go up. Suddenly it's not such a bargain anymore. So it was a question, I think, in a lot of people's eyes of saying, well, do I really want to make sure these people get what others are getting, get that wage, get the benefits, get all that stuff? Or do I want to keep the prices down so that when I go out, I don't have to worry about spending the same amount of money for these guys that I pay for a taxi? That's why I've always done it. I think there might have been something there, that people were thinking about their own self-interest and voting accordingly. The other thing is, organized labor only has so much money to go around. And you've got to pick your battles on this one. And they could have put a lot more money into it, but they decided to do it with other things, whether it was the, local or national elections. And so that's another thing. They didn't have the bandwidth, in my opinion, or decided not to dedicate the bandwidth to really facing it in a more serious way. But that's now the law, and that's that. Let's look at the stem cells 14. that's an interesting one. It's a very niche industry, so to speak, that has survived via bonds that we passed a few years ago. They're running out of money. Do you think we still ought to do this? It was passed again. Again, I want to make sure that we understand this. The data I have is already old. It was made available this morning by the Secretary of State's office. There are millions of votes to be counted, many of them in Southern California. And I think we're a long way from being assured of anything within 10 points, anything within 10 points. So we want to, that's the caveat I want to issue. So 5149, right now it's passing. Prop 15, of course, which would have been the first major overhaul of Prop 13. Again, the data I have, 48% yes, 52% no. Is it possible that that could pass? Yeah, it is. But with money things, if people believe that it's going to cost more money, then they're not likely to do it. And because even if you don't own property, well, this guy's going to pass his costs on to me, that kind of a thing. And the question is, do you go ahead and vote to tax businesses and corporations more with the money going to local governments and education? Or do you say, well, they've got enough? And I think that's the kind of thinking that a lot of people did. So it's losing, again, only by 4 points, and who knows. One that I think looks like it's going to lose is one that's baffled me. I mean, I think I have some ideas about why. Proposition 16, 4456, okay? That's probably outside of the margins here in terms of being turned around. It could be, but I don't think so. And that's the one, of course, that would repeal the ban on affirmative action. Okay, now we always think about California as being so liberal. Sometimes people get confused, and I think there are people who got confused about Prop 16 because I think they might have read it as if, well, if you pass it, we're going to ban affirmative action, okay? Or I had it worked out in my head. Anyway, I think they were confused of the yeses or the nos on that one. And I want to say something else. You note that the California NAACP was against Prop 16. And I think that confused a lot of people. I want to tell you the backstory to that. The backstory is that the head of the California, as I understand it, the head of the California NAACP, Alice Huffman, was given a contract of $1.2 million to dedicate resources against Prop 16, against Prop 15, and against one more, against 21, rent control. And more than that, you saw her face on every ad. And that led people away. If the NAACP's against this, okay? So some of that came into play. And this is why, you've got to think about the whole picture. When I look at propositions, I mean, and some of them, this one isn't so confusing to me, but some of them are. And if I really don't know what to do, I look to see what the organizations I like are saying, or the organizations I don't like are saying. 25 years ago when I would vote about something and I didn't know, I looked at the Mercury News, I saw what they endorsed, I knew I'd do the opposite. It was perfect. Of course, that newspaper's changed now. It's not so simple anymore. The Tony Ritter days. But anyway, and I think some people thought, okay, if this is what the NAACP says, good enough for me. I'm voting against it. 17, the rights regarding prisoners passes 5941. That's safe. That's too far gone in terms of turning that one around for those who want to turn it around. A fairly innocent one, giving 17-year-olds who would be 18 at the time of the general election the opportunity to vote in the primary. I thought that was a no-brainer. Wrong again, Gerston. It looks like it's failing, 45 to 55.
Harry, we're running up against the time zone here.
Thank you for that, Fernando. Okay, then let me just say one or two others real quick. The rent control failed, 40 to 60. Again, I think that's too far out of the margins to worry about changing. And that's about it. A lot to talk about, and I hope we got through some of it.
Before I say anything else, are you available to stick around after 1:15 when we close this off formally?
I am.
Okay, great. Well, listen, thank you for coming to talk to us today. As always, fascinating to hear your perspectives. Next week, we've got, for Veterans Day, a speaker, retired Army Lieutenant General Herbert McMaster, the 26th U.S. National Security Advisor from 2017 to 2018 under President Trump. General McMaster served extensively in areas of armed conflict in the Middle East, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and his topic is battlegrounds. I don't know if they're political or military, but they're battlegrounds. So we want
Fernando?
to... yeah.
Fernando, if I may, I understand he's going to give us an election recap.
Well, yeah, by that time we might have one, I hope. Thanks again, everyone. Larry, as always, I appreciate and admire your tenacity. 40 years being the voice of our consciousness. Thank you, No. All right, well, listen, to paraphrase my favorite immigrant governor, hasta la vista, Rotarians, the Zoom meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.
So, Larry, I can continue to ask you some questions that are popping up in the chat. If you got another 5 to 10 minutes, that'd be great.
Let's do it.
So, and there's plenty of questions that are still popping up. Talk about local. If you've got any thoughts. I know that Susan's going to have a new colleague pretty soon on the Board of Supervisors. I mean, no secrets here. She was a major endorser, early endorser of Otto Lee. Any thoughts on that, or any of the other, the state Senate race, or another interesting one is RR, where it looks like we are going to approve a tax to save Caltrain, which I thought was interesting.
And that's amazing. I mean, if it passes, it needs a 2/3 vote, and I didn't check that out this morning. But if it passes, that'll be really something. Look, I mean, this is a bad time for any tax issue. We know this. I mean, because even though a lot of us in the valley are not hurting per se, if we are a bubble, and the rest of the state's another story. So it'll be really important if it does pass for our transportation here. No, the third soup is a no-brainer, at least in the turnout. At least the data I have shows a 60-40 split for Lee. So that's, again, pretty one-sided. And they also get the local votes in around here pretty quick. So I don't think we're going to be waiting too long to put them all together.
Yeah. By the way, I mean, having experienced it, when it's that size, I mean, it just doesn't change.
Yeah.
It may be 58, it may be 62, but I don't think that vote's going to change.
Right. The 15th Senate, Dave Cortese against Ann Ravel, 54% to 46%. I would think that's probably going to stand. Again, a local election is, somewhere around, especially in this county, they're able to put the votes together pretty quickly and count them up. But again, I don't know anything more than what I read from this morning. And the data was compiled as of this morning, I believe. So that looks like Dave Cortese wins. And so, Ann Ravel's first go at it in running for public office. Tough to do against someone who is as well known as Dave Cortese in this community. The 4th and 6th, Cohen over Deep, I think he was somewhat of a controversial person, Deep. So I mean, it looks like in that one, it's really close, 51-5 to 48-5, I think it is. That one, I would say the jury's out. The jury's out. And it's not much different, but probably enough in the 6th. Bev Davis over Jake Tonko, 53-2 to 46-7. Probably a bit more wiggle room for her. And that mess that SVO got into, in terms of that whole campaign. You'll never know to what extent that might have changed some minds and if it changed enough.
I thought she helped herself by coming out really quickly.
She did.
And denouncing it, and that was a very, it was legit, but that was, she had to do it, and she just broke, which was a good lesson, I think, for candidates. When you've got a supporter that's a problem, break with them clean.
And I think she was really sincere about it, by the way. I don't think it was one of these, convoluted political moves. I think she really was offended by it. And I think that kind of comes out when you see it. You see it in a person. This is outrageous. I'm not doing this. And she disavowed SBO's support, and it may well have helped her. And, it was a long shot for Franco. It was a pretty close election when you consider all that.
Yeah.
Hey, Larry, this is Larry Stone.
That I'd love to get your comment on, because we've got it in our adjacent city, Santa Clara. Jed York spent $3 million on 4 city council races where there's going to be about maybe 30,000 votes total in those races. Probably going to get three of the candidates elected. Thinking about that, thinking about the amount of money Uber and Lyft and the rideshare companies put in, and I'm not taking a position on whether these are good candidates or bad candidates. Some of them are really good candidates. But the idea of a single entity coming in and either in one instance making their own laws for themselves, or electing or creating the appearance that they're electing their own council persons.
You're right.
Is that a danger? I mean, just the amount of money was just mind-blowing.
Well, once again, this is the kind of thing where people have to really take ownership of their lives. And I think so many people don't. They just take the easy way out. And well, you know what? You get what you deserve. And I'm not taking sides either on this question. They had some, as you said, good candidates. There was an issue of really making sure the minorities had more representation. And I think that was very smart of them to craft their candidates' choices in that kind of a bubble, if you will. We'll see soon enough what happens, whether they are in fact rubber stamps. But the idea of spending, $3 million, it's a lot of money. But it's not the first time heavyweights in a local race have thrown away money like that. There are lots of other examples historically that sometimes we know about and sometimes we don't. Actually, the good thing about this one, I think, was that it was so out there. I mean, this was nobody sneaking it through. It was out there. Yeah, I'm doing it. I don't think the other guys really give us a good deal. They're not fair to us. So here's who I'm supporting. So, I think people will figure out whether they've made a good choice or not. And it's, again, money, I think, can play a role, but in this case, it might have, yeah.
So there's a lot of clamoring with more questions. If you can go to 1:30, can you go to 1:30, Larry?
We'll do 1:30.
Okay. A lot of people want to know what we can do about the Electoral College. You touched on it, and it's, my understanding, it's a constitutional. I mean, this is a constitutional issue. There is this state pact thing where if you get 270, Electoral College worths of states, you think that's feasible? Do you think? I mean, I don't think that with the composition of the Senate, it doesn't seem to me like there's going to be much appetite for getting rid of the Electoral College amongst the 52 Republicans that are going to be serving in the Senate.
Well, I think we have two issues here. One, and you're right, Steve, first of all, it takes a constitutional amendment to do this, to get rid of it and make it, let's just call it, just a national election, where just like the popular vote, make determines the president. Two hurdles, and you've already alluded to one of them. One hurdle is that the Senate has to go along because it takes a 2/3 vote in the Senate and in the House. Okay, you might get it in the House. The Senate 2/3, these guys voting against their self-interest in North Dakota, Montana. And let's just say for some reason the guys were out drinking late and foolishly went ahead and voted on it, okay? Then you go to the states. You need 3/4 of the states to ratify it. Well, tell me, South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, we can go on and on and on about all these states that have disproportionate influence, and not only influence, success in this race and all races because of their size. I mean, I think of like a place like, I think it's Wyoming, I've done this before, who has like one a member of Congress, one member of the House, 2 senators, that's 3. We have 55. Okay, we may lose one next year. 55. So we're roughly 18 times the power in the Electoral College that Wyoming has, but we have 40 times the population. There's your disconnect right there. Okay, and so the argument is people in populated states aren't getting their share, and the other guys are saying, well, you know what? It's not only about people; it's also about land. That's how it was put together. And I can't imagine 3/4 of the states going ahead with it. I just can't. No.
Do you see a similar along those lines? There's a lot of talk about demographic change, particularly in some of the southern, southwestern states. I mean, seeing a little bit of it maybe in Georgia. They talk about it in Florida and Texas, which certainly, if Texas became a blue state, would be transformative. I don't know. I felt like last night put the kibosh on that for a while. What do you see demographically happening? It seems like we're back to the Rust Belt, being the last wall for Democrats.
I think it's the opposite. Arizona, first of all, we saw Nevada go, right? Nevada is considered a blue state now, okay? Arizona, this will be the first election, I don't know how many years, where a Democrat wins the presidency if Biden holds on. And that's demography. The demographers for years, the political demographers have focused on 2024 when Texas becomes competitive. I think they were competitive this year. I think the Democrats were competitive in Texas. There's no doubt in my mind there were. Florida is an interesting case in itself because there's so many different groups there. And the minorities in Florida don't stack up like they do in Texas. In Texas, the Latino vote, as in Arizona, is much like the Latino vote here. In Florida, the Latino vote is substantially Cuban. And that's where Trump and his people were so good at tagging the socialist label onto Biden and how he'll carry out Castro's policies or whatever, okay? I think you're seeing change. By the way, you're seeing change in the Rust Belt states too, okay? The other way. They're going to become, if they're not already, more competitive there, more competitive for a number of reasons. First of all, there aren't nearly as many minorities there, okay? You look at Pennsylvania and Wisconsin particularly, they're pretty white. And when they see what's going on, look, there's an undertow in this country. And this is not pretty, but I'm going to say it because you can't fire me. The undertow is that we have a population that is changing. The whites this time around were 3 to 4% fewer voters as non-whites. It's been trending that way for some time. We know that it's a 2045, I think they're saying now, something like that. Non-whites in this country, non-Hispanic whites, will be more than whites. As these numbers grow, their role as voters grows, and I think there is a real backlash to that among whites, particularly white males. And it comes with that. That's the reason. I'm not saying that's the only reason Trump has supporters. I'm sure there are a lot of good people who believe in low taxes, and that Trump will help them out with that. There are people who believe in curtailing abortion rights. Trump helped them out. But I do think one of the fundamental underpinnings to Trump's success is his ability to tap into that group of voters that feels frightened, apprehensive. They're going to take my job. They're going to take my culture, right? And that group is not going away. Their numbers may be shrinking, and as they shrink, they become more and more visible.
One last question on media, where I know you're an expert. Fox News is a source. I'm seeing it in a chat. Primary news source for over 60% of Republicans. There's no other news source that communicates to one group quite like that megaphone. And Trump, frankly, uses it very effectively. You know, he uses Twitter effectively to communicate. He uses Fox News effectively to. How important is that in your estimation to the outcome, to the future of our country?
Well, I'm going to go up to 30,000 feet on this one. And this is the time for some of you to go to sleep, I guess. I think the issues here are far more than Fox News. I think the issues are we're overly dependent. And here I am, TV now for 40 years. We're overly dependent on things like TV. We're overly dependent on social media. We're overly dependent on quick answers to complicated questions. We have totally abandoned civic knowledge in our schools. We've totally abandoned it. You know, when I was a kid, we did things like we stood up and did the Pledge of Allegiance. Now that might seem corny, okay? But the Pledge of Allegiance meant a lot of things when I was a kid. When I was a kid, we learned about things like how government works, what government does. They don't do that anymore. They just don't do that anymore. The only things that kids learn about this in high school is a 12th grade semester course on government, where basically they learn all the state capitals. Oh, wonderful. And this is fundamental to who we are. It's fundamental to who we are. And we have abandoned that platform altogether. And we are paying the price. We've done this now for 2 generations, and we are paying the price. People know less and are trying to do more. And as they try to do more, they're taking all the shortcuts in the world. And unless we as a society cut to the chase and start investing in our kids in a very serious way in terms of civic engagement, you're going to see the Fox News types of stations only continue to do better than they've done. And I'm telling you, I get people nodding to me all the time. And then when there's a damn vote on it, you know, I don't want to pay to do that. I don't want to pay that. Teachers make too much money, this or that, whatever. I think it's a tragedy. And I think it's the reason we're downstream. If we implode as a society, that's going to be part of it. Ooh, that's a terrible way to end this. I'm sorry. But anyway.
Well, let me help you there. I just got word that Michigan went for Biden. So now we just are waiting for Arizona and Nevada to see what happens there.
There you go.
Larry, you are the best. You really are a treasure. And I mean, to do you did probably 40 minutes of questions for us. That was just amazing. And I look forward to seeing you. Hopefully I'll see you again soon, but look forward to seeing you here in November of 22, talking about the composition of the Senate and, you know, the various, who the governor is and all the state races, which you know so much about. So
and let's hope we're all together.
Yes, yes.
Thank you all for having me.
Nancy says she's got a glass of wine waiting for you, Larry.
Right next door. All the best to you all.
All right, thank you.
Thank
you.